The Center for Procurement Excellence is a nonprofit member organization with a mission of educating, promoting, and advocating for better RFP processes. Join CPE today and make your RFPs faster and more transparent. Membership also includes discounts to all of our training and networking events. CPE hosts a variety of virtual and in-person networking and training events throughout the year. Visit our website to get signed up. CPE Speakers Bureau is available for your regional and national meetings and professional conferences. Contact us to learn more.
Welcome to Ask the RFP Doctor, CPE's monthly web series where we discuss the latest best practices in procurement and supply chain management.
Okay, let's dive into today's topic here and kind of go through some of the main lessons learned and things we've seen with regards to document deficiencies and how do we think about that. So when we think about what we're asking ourselves here is, what do we know and what do we tell each other about the problems we might see in our projects, right? So when you go through and develop a set of specifications or a drawings or project details as to what we want done, there's, of course, certain assumptions that we make about how we're going to deliver that particular project. And when we do that, that can lead to perhaps inaccuracies or maybe not the full picture of what's done. The contractors, our service providers, on the same hand, also do the same thing, is that they know that there's might be deficiencies on the project. And the question we ask ourselves is, well, do they actually realize that there's issues with the plans or specifications before they actually bid and propose on the project? And if that's the case, then, well, what do we do about it and how do we mitigate those issues? So we're going to go through that. We did a research study in this area, and we're going to highlight the results, and hopefully this will provide some good insights here. To start things off here, we had a project we worked on a number of years ago. This is the University of Alberta. And out of curiosity, does anybody know what a cyclotron is? Cyclotron. Anybody heard of a cyclotron? Okay, Dave knows it. Fantastic, right? What a cyclotron is, and Dave, if I get this wrong, you chime in here, let me know here, but a cyclotron is basically a particle accelerator, right? It'll shoot beams, it's mostly for medical work these days. There's other more advanced technologies. It's actually been around since the 1930s, but it is a particle accelerator. That's the gist of what it does. And we create medical isotopes and different things that are attached to that, right? And actually, it does, Victor. The one we built at Alberta takes us to the quantum realm, which is fantastic. Anybody seen Inception, the movie? Right, that's a whole other discussion here when you think about that here. But that's what we're focused on here, is a particle accelerator. So these are some of the pictures of the job. Here's the final picture we have of the job. And what this is, this wall right here is concrete. And what this does here, rolls in front of this door. This is inside the particle accelerator in here. And when we need to get in, the door opens up. This wall is like six or 7 feet thick. I mean, it's crazy, right? So it's a big particle accelerator, a really complicated technology. And because of that, there's some things from a design standpoint. And trust me, today's topic is not about physics. It is about procurement. But there's a really interesting lesson learned that we saw in this project here, right? Of particular interest in this project, $32 million, so a very large design build project. The schedule milestones are very sensitive. And what I mean by that is that there's lots of hardware and equipment that has to be delivered at a certain point in time. And it's not like you can call the manufacturer and say, oh, sorry, we're delayed schedule, hold off on that. Or we need to more accelerate it once you speed things up. You can't do that, right? There's a very specific schedule on this particular project. The other big part too with this project is that the number of approvals that, just like any project that involves anything nuclear, is the amount of approvals and review and all sorts of things, public input, is absolutely substantial. And because of that, again, schedule is also important here. So what the owner decided to do, the University of Alberta, is they partnered with us to deliver a better procurement experience. So that's basically what we did with them. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road in terms of what we actually saw in this project. And this is a true story. So we're going through the project. We had this planning phase here. I'm going to turn off video just so we can talk about this for a moment. We had this pre-planning phase where the contractor's going through before the contract is signed, and they're looking at all the different documentation that's on the project. What they see as part of that is that the contractor is going through the details And they realized that the dimensions on the job site are off about 18 inches. The entire site, the perimeter of the building, everything's off about 18 inches. The contractor calls us up and they are obviously nervous, they're uncomfortable, and they say, we've got an issue on the project. And the fact is that the drawings that the owner provided to us are not exactly correct. They're too large, and so we're not sure what to do about that. And so we're taken aback a little bit, like, well, what do you mean? What should you do about it? The answer, of course, is do what? Is you tell the owner about it and let's fix this, right? Well, as it turns out, their normal mode of operation, just like many suppliers and contractors, is that if we hold off telling the owners about these issues, we're less likely to be cut from the project, right? Or in other words, if you have a contractor that's telling you, hey, there's all these issues in place, there's no contract ready, and you have a different companies telling them, hey, you got no problems, everything's great. A lot of times the owners emotionally are just more likely to go with somebody that is telling them everything's fantastic. So the contractors have learned over a number of years is that if we do things that are not upfront, not clearing out what's actually going to happen, it can be a very difficult discussion. So the contractor was nervous about telling the owner about this and all of the implications it have, right? So they ask us, our response is you absolutely need to tell the owner immediately about this because that's why we have this clarification phase. There is a deficiency in the plans, and we need to know about that and to address those issues. So that's basically the scene here for what happened on this actual project. So the building dimensions, like I said, were wrong. The vault design, and because of that, that affected everything else about the design. The wall thickness, pilings, different shielding requirements, how they're actually to design out the full project had to be modified based on these incorrect assumptions, if you were, about the project, right? So there's the existing structures that also had some structural issues and other things that were attached to this project here, right? So this is a big deal. We found out about it early, and that's a key piece of information, right? Here's another picture on the inside of it. I mean, just we've all been in different types of facilities, but the amount of like mechanical work in this particular project is just crazy, right? I mean, if you have 18 fewer inches, or I guess 36 inches, looking at the full dimension, I mean that's a lot, right? That's a big deal, right? So, in summary, here on this particular project, they identified the issue before the contract was signed. That's a major takeaway with this, right? Part of this process that we work with the owner is let's talk about what might go wrong with the project before we sign the contract. And let's work through and mitigate these issues so that when we actually get to the project, we're not spending time thinking about what to do. We're actually doing and developing and designing our project here, right? Because of this and our ability to adjust these things during the design process save the owner a significant amount of time. In fact, the contractor estimated that in their normal process, this type of issues would not have been identified until 5 months after project start, right? So this is a big deal. We talked to the owner, Mr. Hugh Warren. He has since retired from Alberta, but and they did an internal audit. They estimated in total they saved north of a year and about $8 to $12 million in total project costs just because we identified this issue upfront, right? And look at Hugh. Look how happy he is, right? The point of this here is that when we think about things ahead of time, this makes a big difference, right? Now, let's kind of change this discussion a little bit and let's think about this a little bit further. And in fact, our main discussion now is going to shift to, well, how often do we know about these things ahead of time? How often do we know about problems before we actually sign the project? So we undertook a research project. Again, this was focused on construction, but our view, this applies universally across most business sectors, right? So just because it's focused on construction doesn't mean it doesn't apply elsewhere, right? So there's really three different things that we decided to do. We surveyed about 160 contractors and owners, so it's a pretty large sample size. We asked them, at what point in time do you identify document deficiencies or problems with the project? Is it before or after contract execution? That's the first thing. The second thing is, when do owners learn of these issues and when do they resolve them? And then finally is, how do these issues affect project cost and duration? Now, these projects they are talking about, we weren't involved with. This is just a normal type of projects, and we're asking them to estimate or evaluate the typical impacts that these might have. Now, when I talk about document deficiencies, there's a couple different things that this might entail. This can be design errors and omissions. So we forgot to include something, or whatever design is not going to work. That would be more constructability. Can we actually build the thing? Specifications are not right. Quantities are inaccurate, high or low, or we forgot something. Material issues, contractual inconsistencies. I had a project this summer where there was major contractual differences between what the contractor had to do and what the owner intent was. And the contractor's view is that what they're asking for would have cost them millions of more dollars because of the contractual requirements they had laid out, right? So these are some examples of document deficiencies, right? So the first thing we ask the respondents to provide to us, and these are the percentage of respondents, 91% of respondents said that the design drawings contain errors, inaccuracies, omissions. 79% had constructability concerns, and all the way down the line to 14% have material issues. So the reason why this slide is important to us here is that this tells us, firstly, is that we know most projects have issues with it, right? That's not shocking or anything like that. We know most projects have issues. It also breaks down the types of issues that most projects have here. Okay, so that's setting the stage here for what we're seeing going on with this. What we found here is that the impact of these issues we find in our documents, 91% of these result in cost impacts. 81% of these result in schedule delays. So we know there's issues, but we also know that the impacts of these issues, if they're not addressed, have real major issues that are going to affect how we deliver the project, right? So when we think about that, these are major things that we need to think about and how that affects how we're going to deliver our project, right? So here, this is the next slide here. This is by far the biggest impact of what this all means here, right? So take a look at this. Imagine your typical 3 phases of delivering a project. You have your bidding phase, pre-construction, and then construction. Typically, when contract execution happens is between that bidding phase and that pre-con phase, right? So this is our typical schedule, right? The main question we had for our respondents here is, when do you find out about these issues? That's one of the main questions. In addition to everything else we asked them is, at what point in time of all these issues identified, when do you find out about that? Okay. So the blue numbers, those are the contractors, and the orange are the owner's responses. So in the bidding phase, 38% of them, contractors said they knew about issues. 90% of the owners said they knew about issues. During pre-construction, 22 and 19%. And then finally in construction phase, 40% and 62%. Now let's take a look here. Let's just pause for a moment. Look at this chart and what stands out to you with this. I mean, there's some shocking results here. Do y'all see this? Yeah, right? There's a 19% variance between what the contractors know about and what the owners know about in the bidding phase before we signed anything. There's a 20% differential between what we're being told as an owner and what the contractors actually know on here, right? During pre-construction, 22%, 19%, pretty close. And then of course, construction phase, we would expect to see the opposite. And that's what we see during the construction phase. That's when most owners find out about the issues here. So take a step back here, and what is this telling us? How is this beneficial, or how is this valuable to us as an owner, right? So Victor, we should have done some more RFI market research ahead of time. I agree. But I also think that there's some much more significant implications this has about this, right? What this tells us here is that if I'm a contractor, I know what problems are going to happen on the project. This is a major takeaway for this, right? We know about these issues ahead of time, and for whatever reason, the owners don't find out about that, right? So the next question we ask our respondents in is, when is the best time to address these issues? So we already know that a lot of folks know about issues ahead of time. The next question is, well, when should we tell people about that, and when should we resolve it? The owners think, again, owners are blue, contractors are green, or excuse me, orange. 98% of the owners, that's them right here, said that this should be addressed before the contract is signed, right? I mean, most of us are owners here. You'd like to know about this stuff before you sign a contract. The contractors, however, said that after 43% of them said that after the contract is signed is the best timing to do that. 22% it doesn't make a difference, and 35% before the contract is signed. So this difference here between before the contract is signed and after it is signed is absolutely substantial. Which leads to the next question here is, why are contractors hesitant to identify this to us as owners before that contract is signed? That's the question we should be asking ourselves here. And in my opinion, I think the reason why this happens here is that the contractors have been burned so many times in the past here that when they are transparent and when they do identify issues, they're not actually able to get it fixed. Or they go to somebody else that is not actually saying, well, there's no issues here, everything's fine, and they lose out on the project opportunity. So in going through the contractors and talk with them is that there's a lot of hesitation and a lot of consternation about how they think things are actually going to go on the projects, right? The final question we ask them with this is, at what point in time, or excuse me, how do you agree that these should be identified before construction? And what you see here is that everybody across the board here is that if you identify these issues before construction starts, there are time and cost savings. I mean, 50% of the respondents agree that this will save time and money on our projects. They all think that if you do this ahead of time, this will resolve issues on our projects here, right? Now, again, this study was not a small sample size. I mean, this is almost 200 contractors, owners that responded to this, and they provide a lot of details and insights as to what actually is going on here. So I think the main takeaway with this here, as we think about this, final thoughts with this, is that transparency before contract award is really crucial, especially since a lot of the time we already know about it, right? We already know that there's issues here. The contractors know about it, and it's beneficial. It's in everybody's best interest. That's what we advocate for, to talk about these things ahead of time. The key issue is what are people thinking about, and why don't they want to talk about these things before we sign the contract? Which therefore leads to our last point here, is plan before you sign, right? Plan what's going to happen before you sign the contract, because when we have these discussions ahead of time, this can help mitigate significant issues on our projects.
This has been Ask the RFP Doctor, brought to you by the Center for Procurement Excellence.